Welcome back, everybody. Today's topic is related to SEO. So a little different than our normal topics, but as we all know, part of optimization, of course, includes search engine optimization. So we've invited my colleague, head of SEO at Search Discovery, Jacob Stoops. He is a amazing SME in the field. Actually, as we talked about a little bit earlier, co-hosts Page 2 podcast for SEO, which is actually pretty entertaining considering the topic. No offense, Jake. So everybody should check that out. But Jake's going to talk to us today about Google's page experience algorithm changes, some of which are already happening and others that are coming soon, what it is, how you can prepare, and all that jazz. So welcome, Jake, and I'll let you take the mic, as they say.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction and the opportunity to talk a little bit about my favorite thing, SEO, or at least my favorite professional or work related thing. Um, yeah, just excited to share kind of what I know about the page experience update, answer questions. I mean, heck, I think we could potentially, if we have time, even get into like broader SEO questions if y'all if we have time and you guys have the curiosity. So we're going to cover the page experience algorithm update today. I'll talk about what it is. And it's funny that we say how you prepare because, of course, we prepared this deck material right before it actually rolled out. So it's not really how you can prepare. It's here. So now it's pretty much how you can react. So um, I don't know how many people in this group, if there's a way to raise hands, I'm going to assume that maybe some people have some SEO experience or you're on Twitter, maybe you have your ears to the ground. You've probably heard of something called the page experience update, or maybe you've heard it referred to as core web vitals, cumulative layout shift. There are about 18 different ways to refer to what is going on. Long story short, Google, of course, has an algorithm, and it is a very complex algorithm, and they use that to rank websites in organic search. So sites that are doing well according to kind of what's in their algorithm. Tend to rank higher than those that do not. And there are a lot of different factors that go into their algorithm. They constantly make changes to the algorithm. They make daily changes. They release broader updates. In fact, they just before they released this did what's called a broad core algorithm update, which is a bigger change. And on the heels of that came the page experience algorithm update. So they don't do this often, but they gave us about a year's notice before they released this. So all the way last year, all the way in May of 2020, they said, hey, this is coming. You need to get ready. And basically the goal of the page experience update is to reward sites that are creating great experiences for their users. So that is kind of the very broad goal. And they said, you need to prepare. You've got a year. This is going to be coming in May of next year. And fast forward. So in terms of what it is, there are actually 7 signals that go into what they're calling the page experience update. And the ones you'll hear most about are core web vitals. And we'll focus a lot on those today because the other ones are pretty self-explanatory. But the other ones were smaller parts of the algorithm prior to this that are now kind of being rolled up and into this broader measure of page experience. So things like, is your website mobile friendly? Is it safe for users to browse? They're not going to get a virus or a download that they didn't ask for if they go to your website. Is it secure? Do you have a good experience in terms of not promoting intrusive interstitials or pop-ups, that cover the entire screen. And of course, the core web vitals, which are probably the newer ones, but they're related to things that will make sense and that were part of the algorithm before. But all of these things are being rolled up into what Google is now calling their page experience signals. In terms of what the core web vitals are, so we're going to get into each one of these by itself and talk about exactly what it is. How do you understand how you're doing? What are the common causes of issues in these particular areas? And yeah, we'll talk about how to diagnose exactly what's going on your website. So of course, this is kind of a three-part metric. So it includes largest contentful paint, first input delay, and cumulative layout shift. And I'm just going to admit, all of those things sound really, really, really technical, and it's because they are. And this is one of those areas where, like, there are times when I think Google is too broad in the way that they have to talk to the industry and not specific enough. And then there are times where they're way, way in the weeds and do not make it really easy for people to understand. Like, before they came out and called this core web vitals, if you had asked me what is a core web vital, I would have said, I have no idea. Is that related to like your pulse? How well, like, are you going to die? How well you're doing? Because that term doesn't really make a lot of sense. Largest contentful paint, like, if you're not a site speed expert, which that has to do with, you won't know what that is. If you're not an expert in how a browser renders the content of a website, you wouldn't understand. First input delay, like, that's really a weird thing. The only one that's really clear, in my opinion, in terms of what it is cumulative layout shift, but it's a mouthful. So we'll talk about each one of these, but I'm going to just say, from somebody that works on it every day, if you're confused by what it is, and I'm not saying that everybody is, don't worry, it's normal. It's a little confusing even to those that work in the industry every day as well. So it's kind of complex. So when they introduced this algorithm update, they, of course, came out with explanations of what these things are and exactly how you can be, quote unquote, good according to their algorithmic measure of what a good page experience actually is. And I am going to caveat this by saying that all of those seven, the seven things that they're kind of baking into this page experience update, you might do poorly on those and still actually deliver a good experience to your customers. So this is a little bit more of Google's attempt to put some sort of algorithmic computation to a good page experience. And I would anticipate that at some point there will be like other factors that go into it. But just because you're failing in some of these areas doesn't mean you have a terrible, terrible page experience. It just means that according to the things that Google measures, you could improve. So largest contentful paint. Basically what this is, it's related to speed. So when you have an issue with largest contentful paint, you're also probably going to have an issue with your site's speed. And everybody knows that site speed, there are a lot of studies out there that prove that sites that are fast lead to higher conversion, higher levels of interactivity. Sites that are slow lead to the opposite. People don't stay on your site as long, bounce a lot more frequently, don't convert as well. So largest contentful paint is an element. It's kind of a symptom of poor site speed. And basically, this is the amount of time that it takes to load the largest element in the above the fold section of your page, right? So this could be an image, this could be a video, a CSS background, it could be a third-party script, it could be a block of text. It's basically determining how long does it take the browser to render the biggest thing on the page. And is that timing within an acceptable level according to Google? And you can see their measure of what is good versus what is bad. So the goal would be to have a largest contentful paint of less than 2.5 seconds. That would qualify you as passing this particular measure. First input delay is the other one. So first input delay is a little bit different, still, in my opinion, related to speed. It is essentially basically when the browser shows you something that you can interact with. That's the start of the first input, and when you're able to actually do something. So if there's a link that you want to click, a button, whatever the case may be, something that you can interact with on the page, when you either tap it or click it, the time that it takes for you to go from tapping it to it actually doing the thing that it's supposed to do, that is the first input delay. And you can kind of see that in the measure. And whatever that is, again, the timing should be as minimal as possible. And I will say that this is often also impacted by things related to speed, but I would say that this is more related to things that are happening in the background, the order of how your page is loading styles, loading scripts. Sometimes there's render blocking that causes delays in the ability to actually interact with a web page, even though you can visually see what's happening. So this is another measure that I think is leveled up into speed. So that's 2 out of the 3 core web vitals related to speed. We all know speed introduced probably 7 or 8 years ago, was a minor part of the algorithm. So that part of the algorithm is kind of going to be leveling up into just broader page experience. So that's first input delay. And then cumulative layout shift. I think Google provides a really, really clear indicator. I'm sure everybody has experienced this, especially if you're trying to do something on a mobile device where you've accidentally tapped something that you thought was supposed to be one thing and accidentally clicked on another thing and launched an ad, or in this case, bought something that you didn't want to buy. And basically, this is a measure of the visual stability of the web page. And how severely something within the viewport unexpectedly shifts. So the higher your score, and it's measured on a score of I don't know what exactly it goes up to, but you'll see, especially if you're in one of the measurement tools, like you'll see something like 0.4 or 0.5, and the higher the number is, the more shift you have. The goal would be for your score to be 0, which means your web page is visually stable and not shifting around at all. So the goal is for it to not shift, not do unexpected things to users when they're trying to interact with the page. So there are often things that lead to this. We'll talk a little bit more about those later, but it could be slow loading JavaScript. It could be not setting the height and width of the containers on your website so that they break out of the containers. Not setting height and width on images and relying on browsers to calculate them and having it break out. And just basically anytime that there's something where your website, you expect something to be where it is, and then something that loads slowly shifts it down or shifts over top of it. Something that you as a user would not be anticipating. Here's what we know about the update. So last week, in fact, the day after I put the name on the cover slide that said how you can prepare, because we knew it would be rolling out soon, it actually rolled out. So it's starting to roll out. It rolled out beginning on June 15th. And according to Google, it's going to roll out gradually. It will not play its full role in the algorithm until August. And initially, it will be focused on mobile search results. So if you're working on any fixes, focus on mobile first. That being said, it will eventually roll out and impact desktop search results. So if you don't know, Google has a mobile index and a desktop index now. It all used to be one. They've now split it out into a mobile and desktop index, which are both slightly different systems. The other thing, and I'm sure you all have seen this from time to time, Google testing different things within search results. One thing that they're considering testing here is a visual indicator of sites that present a good page experience, similar to probably what they do with accelerated mobile pages. My personal opinion of that is that I don't think that that is I don't think that that's going to stick around, because the search results are already messy enough as it is, with a lot of indicators and confusing things. So to have to flag potentially 10 out of 10 sites on the first page, it just might get a little more jumbled than it needs to be. But maybe that's also Google anticipating that many sites are not going to be very good, which honestly, that's in the sites that I've seen, that's the case. There are a lot of sites that have a lot of room for improvement. All right, so in terms of how this might impact you, really four main ways, of course, because this is kind of an organic search thing. Of course, if you're not doing well in your quote unquote page experience, your core web vitals, and I would say probably most sites are going to hit the non-core web vitals page experience. You'll probably pass those no problem. It's really the core web vitals where you might have issues. And basically what can happen, and this is similar to any algorithm update, is, if you're not in line with where you need to be, or your competitors suddenly improve, this could be something that causes a decline in your organic rankings. And of course, what happens as a result of that is you lose organic awareness, you lose organic traffic, less traffic equals less conversions, so on and so forth. And then, of course, if you're not meeting the core web vitals standards and they decide to keep that flag around, you're not going to get the nice little page experience flag in search results, which might make some users skeptical of clicking on your site, which again could lead to lack of traffic, even if your rankings stay good. And then, of course, if you're not doing well here, this is symptomatic of the type of experience that you might be delivering across all channels, right? So core web vitals, especially the two related to speed, that affects every channel. So does layout shift. I would say layout shift is worse, when it's happening on mobile devices. But this may affect you organically, but it may be symptomatic of the fact that you might be delivering just a not great overall experience, at least in those couple of ways, to all channels. So there may be offshoot, not that you would see loss in rankings or anything in paid search that has nothing to do with it, but it's more just an indicator that you might need to improve your overall experience, and that could result in good things elsewhere as well. How to check. So there are lots of different ways. I've named 5. There are more than 5 different ways that you can check how you're doing with your page experience and your core web vitals. Of course, there's Google Search Console, which is free to set up, for your website. All it requires is that you verify your website in Google Search Console. There are SEO tools, Screaming Frog, Sitebob, Deep Crawl, Web Page Test, which is a speed tool. And there are many others, technical SEO tools that have integrated, because we've had enough warning, they've almost all to a T integrated some measurement for core web vitals into their system to help you scan your site and diagnose where you have issues. Google PageSpeed Insights will give you some pretty precise findings. Google Chrome, the Lighthouse reports, that you can get right inside your browser. And then, of course, the Google Chrome user experience reports, which is a compilation of all of Google's user data related to, I believe they have like 4 or 5 million sites included in that report. So there's a pretty good chance that your site is in there and you can get some valuable data back. So we'll talk about each one. So if you're in Google Search Console, down the left-hand rail, the navigation rail, you're going to see something called page experience. So that's going to tell you the percentage of good, quote unquote, good URLs. those are the URLs that pass according to their measure of page experience, core web vitals, so on and so forth. And the goal, of course, would be to get that to 100%. Right under that is going to be a separate section for core web vitals, and it's going to show you based on the URLs that they have a record of or a sample of how you're doing both on desktop and mobile. And the source here is going to be from the Chrome user experience report data. So this is their data with real world users and kind of an aggregate of what they're experiencing. My recommendation initially, especially because the rollout is really going to affect mobile first, is that you should prioritize the mobile version of this report first. If you have a responsive site, that's great. Most sites are responsive. You know, a change, you know, to your responsive site should impact both of these areas, but I would really prioritize mobile. Of course, there are SEO tools as well, as I mentioned, and you can see this is an example of Screaming Frog, where it pulls in a couple of the core web vitals metrics, specifically largest contentful paint, cumulative layout shift, and allows you to crawl through your site to really pinpoint which pages have the worst issues. So a really great way to diagnose all the way down to the page level. Now, what I would recommend looking at here is most sites have templates, right? So one template might impact hundreds or thousands of pages. And a lot of times when we fix stuff for clients, we try to pinpoint template issues, not individual page issues. Now, it's not to say that individual pages on the same template can't have different levels of issues, but chances are if you make the fix at the template level, it will trickle down to all pages. So we made a fix for one of our clients that had a lot of poor results, and it cut their poor results by about 90% because it was all one template. So really recommend, if you're very familiar with your website, to hone in on common templates and of course, level of severity, and try to prioritize severity plus template. And of course, there's Google PageSpeed Insights. This is one of my favorite tools for not just diagnosing core web vitals issues, but also just general page speed issues. So you're going to get very specific, and I couldn't fit the entire screenshot in here. You're going to get very specific advice as it relates to fixing the speed of your website on this site. However, you're also going to get core web vitals metrics, and you're going to get a couple of ways. And this data comes from two places: the field data, which is a measure of actual real experience over real user experiences over the course of about the last 28 days. So it's going to be a little bit different, and that's based on the Chrome user experience report, Crux report. And then you're going to get a lab data measure, which is simulated based on your specific connection. So theoretically, if you want to, the field data numbers would change probably on a daily basis, once a day. The lab data could change every time you run the report. You might get slightly different data because it's simulated. It's based on your connection. So this is going to give you an idea of what actual real users are experiencing, and then it's going to allow you to kind of diagnose what's going on exactly right now. And the value of that is you can see data over the course of time, but the tough thing, especially if you're really focused on field data, is you might have made a change that impacted your site positively, but if it was 27 days ago, you might still be, your metrics might still take a while to catch up. Whereas the lab data can help you with testing, and you can see right away the impact of your changes, and the field data will eventually catch up as real users experience the value of those changes. So it's really valuable in terms of diagnosing where you have issues. Similar things. So if you're more comfortable with Lighthouse, this is very similar to the lab data that's being pulled within PageSpeed Insights. So within your browser, if you want to go to your developer tools and run a Lighthouse report, you're going to get very similar metrics. And again, it's pulled using the lab data, very same data source coming from Google PageSpeed Insights. So you should see similar things, but within Lighthouse, you'll get also a few different metrics. But this is just one of the other ways to test it. And then, of course, we also have, if you're really familiar with Data Studio, we also have a pre-built Chrome user experience report template that is specifically designed by Google out of the box for measuring your core web vitals. So this is pulled from their Crux, their Chrome user experience report data. You can go, and I think there are, like I said, 4 or 5 million URLs in their system. If you want to go and build your own version of this report, it literally takes 2 minutes to do. And you can populate and get a directional idea of how you're doing for your website. So any user can build this for any website. So if I wanted to go build this for one of my competitors' websites, I could theoretically do that as long as the website's in Google's data source. And what this is going to give you, of course, is your core web vitals metrics. This report is very much high level. So it's very much directional, but it's a good measure. And what I really like about this report is all of the other data sources are either telling you how you're doing right now at this moment, or a very short range of time. Even Search Console only goes back about 3 months. This data source, even though it's not very specific to any page other than your broad website, will tell you how you're doing over the course of time. So when your time threshold runs past the 3 months in Search Console, if you have this as a backup, you'll still be able to see, hey, I really, really sucked in August 2020, and we've made some significant improvements as of May 2021 in our CLS score. So this will be a good way, if you choose to utilize it, to check out how you're doing over time. And of course, I've included the link to it's g.co/Chrome UX dash, and that'll take you to a how-to article to actually set up the dashboard if you choose to do so. We're going to talk really quickly about common causes, and then I want to have time for questions. So common causes of largest contentful paint. Again, this is an offshoot of site speed issues. So if your server is slow, if you've got render blocking JavaScript or CSS, your resources, your images, videos, if you've got really large blocks of text and those are slow to load for one reason or another, that might cause your LCP score to be very high. If you're using client-side rendering as opposed to a different way of rendering your website, that might also cause delays and cause a high LCP score. First input delay. This is kind of similar, but it's really more related to how you're handling the loading of your files, the number of request counts. So third-party scripts, if you have lots of these and they're populating in the wrong order, it could cause long first input delay times. If you have a lot of JavaScript, or your JavaScript takes a long time to execute, if you're blocking the main thread of the browser from loading your site efficiently, or if you just have a really, really high number of request counts or like a really massive page size, it may cause this delay, and it may take a while for your site to load all of the assets that you're trying to load. So a symptom of that may be high first input delay. And then of course, CLS, this is probably the easiest to diagnose in my opinion. It's quite simply when you're not doing a good job of defining the sizes of the blocks of content where you have things loading. If you're using third-party scripts, or you're loading an image of a certain size, and you haven't actually set the size of your div and your image expands out of that, that's going to cause some shifting if you've got some issues with bad content inserts. Again, where it's causing things to shift around, overflow the divs on your website. If you've got animations that trigger shifting, which can sometimes happen. Basically, it's anything that could happen on some sort of a delay that would cause your site to shift around in a way that a user might not be expecting. And then one really quick, I would say LCP and FID, all of the other tools that I shared would be really great for debugging those issues. CLS is a little bit harder to debug, and those tools, outside of giving you a score, aren't going to give you as much information on exactly what is shifting around on your web page. They're just going to tell you you're bad. So I've included some other tools here that would go a step further to helping you visually see, and maybe even helping your developers visually see what is actually shifting around on your web page. So the tool that I'm showing in the screenshot, which you can see the shifting, which appears to be happening in that little COVID-19 warning box that they've got at the top. It's called the layout shift GIF generator. So it'll generate a gift that will, not a gift, GIF that will show the actual layout shift. And that's from defaced.dev. There's also an ex-Google engineer that has built a website to show this. There's some Chrome extensions. And Google PageSpeed Insights will help a little bit in terms of showing you the div that is shifting, but it's not actually going to show you like the visual of it shifting. So my favorite is tool number 1, but you can use tool number 1 in combination with tool number 5. You can use the extensions. There are lots of ways to do this, and there are other CLS tools out there. These are just the ones that I've seen, and I've specifically used 1 and 5 and 2 a lot. So I would recommend looking at those for layout shift. So that is all that I have. So now I wanted to open it up for questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Jake. It's a lot of information. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure we think about, since this is the test and learn community, obviously, I think we all know that there are certain like usability improvements that need to be made for search engine optimization, right? For our organic search rankings. But on the optimization front, often I think we know that we frequently, do things that maybe, oh dear, then we have an animated peanut butter on the TLC. Yes. We often do things that actually can negatively impact these things that Jake is telling us we need to fix. So one of the things I want us to think through as we do this Q&A are what are things that we might do as optimizers to help validate the impact of these changes through an A/B test, or to help mitigate any negative impact, or even cooler, how can we use A/B testing to make sure that we are not having a negative impact while optimizing our search engine?
Yeah.
Okay. So, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jake.
I mean, I've got a couple of suggestions there. So I think number one, of course, like when you're implementing a test, just being aware that this exists, that this is out there, and now it's being measured against and could negatively impact a client who, let's say that this client had a perfect site before, and then they start using an optimization service, and all of a sudden they've got a CLS problem. Well, there's a good indication. Maybe it's the whatever service you're using, because you have to embed scripts on the site, whatever the case may be. Using these tools being aware and using these tools to periodically measure. Now, maybe it's not your like full-time job, but periodically measure just in case you may be causing a problem is a good practice. If you're trying to help a client solve a problem, it could be a great opportunity for a test to have the control be the current state of the site, which either is slow, shifts around, has a high first input delay, and then have a test version, which of course has all those issues fixed, and then obviously comparing them against each other to see which performs well. The hope would be that the fixed versions perform better. They should. But again, that's why you test it. So
Absolutely. And we've talked about in the past, if you have a scenario where we know we need to fix it anyway, we can fix it for everything, and then we can sort of back test to slow it down or add in a fake cumulative shift, cumulative layout shift, or whatever, so that we can measure the impact of the improvement, just, to give the SEO team a little love. But most important thing that I found is that optimizers need to work with SEOs. Frequently they sit very, very siloed. And that's one of the big benefits of, you being able to work with you, Jake, and that team, is that we try to make sure that, we ask questions like, hey, how's this going to impact those redirect tests that we all loved 5 years ago? Now we know how dangerous they are and how careful we have to be not to mess up the search ranking. So Grant says, with all these, how can we make sure our experiments in dynamic personalization aren't negatively impacting these at least too much? And I think you just pretty much so answered that question. So I'll move on to Merritt's question. What's worse, slowing down page load by hiding the body until test scripts and content have rendered, or getting dinged for CLS?
I would say that's a very in the weeds question. I would say,
way to go, Merritt.
if you have to measure CLS versus the other two core web vitals, which relate to speed, I'm going to say I'd rather not screw up the speed because that, I think, has a proven more dramatic effect to conversions when speed is good and an adverse effect when it's bad. Whereas CLS, unless it's like really, really severe, I think maybe you could live with that a little bit more.
Well, arguably, if you weren't you saying earlier that you don't necessarily have to avoid like the page loading in different times, like the asynchronous loading, if you have accurately defined the space that the content's going to feed into, correct?
Yeah. So ideally, if all right, so you're loading a certain, let's say you're loading an image, and you know that the image is going to be 100 pixels tall, but if there's going to be a delay, so let's say you're testing one image against the other, and both of your variants are 100 pixels tall, you would just need to make sure that the div block that image is going to be contained within is already preset to the same height as the image, so that there's no shifting once it finally loads, especially if it's later in the load queue. You just want to make sure you preserve the correct amount of space, and that space may be blank until it loads, but it's not going to shift. The layout will stay the same.
Perfect. Jonas says something interesting. Just add core web vitals as metrics to all A/B tests, right? We're doing that. Is anybody else doing that? Adding the core web vital scores, I assume, as secondary or story metrics, or possibly even guardrails.
I mean, I think that's just a function of keeping yourself aware. And if you find that you're causing an issue, of course, being aware is the first step to fixing it. But I think it's good to, depending on the test, to just add those in. They don't have to be primary metrics, but they can just be kind of an FYI for your internal.
What I like about it is often we've talked about, like, how do we measure the impact on search rankings of our A/B tests? And that is a challenge. It's a big hairy mess. I don't know that it's impossible, but I haven't seen it done very effectively. But if we know some of the things that affect your search engine rankings, like these core web vitals, and we can measure those things, then that gives us a proxy for your potential negative impact on organic, which is a very intriguing idea. Matt Polycostro says, forgive me if I'm missing things, shoddy internet. Oh, sorry, Matt. Is anyone else running into fun, in quotes, stakeholder combos about this yet? I.e., well, if it's going to possibly screw up our scores, then we just can't test it. We're starting to add core web vitals, but my personal worry is that our test variation is going to tank every time. And that's hard to position for our clients as anything other than well, this is less bad. Yeah, you're not wrong. So first question, anybody running into questions with their stakeholders that are concerned about this? Second question, are we worried that because the test variations invariably or often will have lower core web vital scores. How do we communicate that? And like maybe we add a buffer, like no more than X% negative impact to these core web vitals. Because remember, it's supposed to be minimally viable testing that we're doing with A/B testing. And maybe we're willing to accept a minimal hit with the understanding that when we roll it out, we're going to roll it out in such a way that it doesn't have that negative impact, we hope, on the core web vitals.
Well, and also if the value of the thing that you're testing turns out to be more than the value of losing slightly from core web vitals, it's like, well, which really actually matters for the business. But I can say, like, one thing that I've had asked to me as a vendor or a consultant is, how severe is this thing going to be? And I think my answer to that is there's a lot of focus on it right now. It's kind of the shiny ball right now because it's been talked about for over a year. So your clients may be really focused in on that. But really, like, in my opinion, if you had to like make it a piece of the pie, it would still be a smaller sliver of the pie. I think all of the metrics, your mobile usability, your security, the interstitial speed, they were all minor metrics before. Now they're adding core web vitals, which is a function of speed. So maybe when you combine all of those metrics into one broader metric, having that be more broad makes it a bigger piece of the pie. But I would still say the number one things you should be focusing on would be, are you delivering the content that your users are searching for? Is your site technically sound? Is it fast? Do you have good signals coming in? At least this is from an SEO perspective. Do you have good signals coming in, links, PR, social mentions, brand equity, brand awareness, those types of things? Those are way more important to focus on. While this may be getting all of the attention now, those other things are the real needle movers in SEO. So
that's a good point. So just because these things are changing doesn't make them necessarily more important than the elements that are already part of the algorithm.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Corey Underwood, Dr. Doom himself, says there are many ways to mitigate various score impacts, but those may include running everything as a server-side test. Tolerance for how important it is to meet scores could determine everything up to including the test platform, to which Matt responds, I was literally about to say, my provocative tinfoil hat question is the long-term solution to migrate more test enrollment experience, management, et cetera, to server side so the changes are less visible to the user client. Which, it's an ongoing debate in the industry. Are we moving everything to server side, and what are the impacts of that?
It's not a debate.
It's not a debate. What's the answer then? Yeah, you muted yourself.
It has to be server side.
Has to be server side. You think everything has to go that direction?
Yes.
Even though so how do you mitigate the increasing cycle cost of the development cost of the server side testing to, align with release cycles and the reviews and the UAT and all that stuff when we're supposed to be doing minimally viable?
To make the technology teams part of the product teams, and you make them do minimal viable stuff. But you're using experimentation to solve the product development problem. This is the wrong problem. It's like,
solve the product development problem.
Sorry, I've ranted about this before. I'll shut up.
No.
I'll tell you, my personal experience when it comes to rendering is that more developers, because they're trying to reduce their costs, I'm running into this right now with a really massive retail client. They want to go entirely client-side rendering and put it all on the user. And I keep trying to tell them, like, that's not going to be that great for SEO.
It's not going to be great for users either.
I want to go server side. And the reality is that most sites, if they're aware of kind of what's going on, will probably meet somewhere in the middle. But I have seen a very concerted push from people on the development side to go with client side rendering, even though like we're trying to push back and say, no, it needs to be server side, but it is getting harder and harder.
It's a big battle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Jonas is grinning. Why are you laughing, Jonas?
I know what to laugh.
All right, so you mentioned that obviously the core web vitals are the things that are changing, but other things are more important. Can you talk to us about what you have seen to be the most important impacts on SEO, especially if you have
Well,
context on things that we might
Yeah,
raise
the
in-
funny thing about this is if you're trying to figure out, like, let's say you own a site and your site just dropped in rankings. Well, Google just rolled out a broad core algorithm update, which is a much more significant and important update. They do these 3 to 5 times a year, or at least like they announce it 3 to 5 times a year. Hey, we're doing the broad core algorithm update. Which is an update, of course, to their core algorithm. It impacts a lot of sites. Not that this won't impact a lot of sites, but I think it's something that will be more impactful. So you've got that butting right up against this core web vitals. So for those of us trying to figure out, okay, well, why did a site drop? It's really, really difficult when you don't have really specific timeline pinpoints. Now, of course, you know what your issues are as a site, but when it comes to diagnosing drops that are associated with specific timelines, it becomes more difficult, which is why I don't personally like following algorithm updates. I like to be algorithm agnostic, meaning that our strategies work in every algorithm. Now, in some updates, they might get slightly adjusted up, slightly adjusted down, but the goal would be that a good SEO strategy is kind of like a 401k, where there may be peaks and valleys, but overall it's going up and to the right.
So you're diversifying across the things that Google cares about?
That would be the goal. And like I said before, and they've actually confirmed this, but they have to say it broadly. When asked #1 ranking factors, they say content, links. Now, I'm not a huge advocate of link building because it's really, really hard. And a lot of times our clients have much more fundamental issues on the technical and, of course, the content strategy and on-site optimization side. Link building tends to come along when things are a little bit more advanced, but it's really, really difficult to manipulate. And if you're working with really, really big clients at scale, all of your manual link building will not be able to scale up to make a meaningful impact unless you literally have an army of people doing that, in which case, like, you have a high risk of looking like spam and doing things that fall into the realm of things that Google penalizes for, which we want to avoid. So my biggest focus is make sure your site is technically sound, easy to crawl, easy for Google to understand, sending the right signals in that way. Make sure you have content that is well optimized, and look for opportunities to answer queries with your content. So always be doing keyword research, always try to understand what are people searching for today, what are emerging searches, and of course try to create content that does a good job of responding to those queries. And then when people get to your site, give them a good experience. Make sure your site loads fast, make it mobile friendly. And of course, like I said, just be a good brand, be a good site. Those types of things tend to work.
And all of those are things the optimizers can help with instead of focusing too much on how we hurt. But I got a really good question, I guess because it was an instant message. I won't name the person. But how much do big brands need to worry about search engine optimization? If our rankings get lower, does it matter because of our brand recognition?
Yes, absolutely. I would argue that if you're a big brand, you need to worry about it more. One, because more people are coming after you because you're a big brand. So of course you're going to have more natural competition, more people looking at you. But if you're a big brand, the volume is much larger. So and I see a mix of brands. Like some brands, most of their organic visits come from branded search. Well, that's a little bit harder for me to impact. Ergo, if you see a drop in organic traffic and it's because your brand interest has fallen, that's harder for me to overcome. If you're a brand that relies a lot on non-branded search, which is people that don't know who you are or that were not intending to buy from you. They were just looking for whoever was the best provider of the thing. I would say it's more impactful. And when you're a big brand and you scale it up, a small dip can result in a really big, visit and financial outcome. So of course, it's absolutely important to be on top of what's going on with your organic search.
Does a dip in search necessarily mean a dip in traffic, or can it mean a transition in channels?
I mean, it could. And I think, we've been seeing that on the organic side for some time, where there's been more real estate in search results given to paid and given to other things. So you may not actually see a ranking dip, but you may be getting less clicks because, hey, Google decided to put 4 ads, on the page for that particular search, or a big knowledge graph, or a featured snippet. So Google is increasingly, over the course of time, trying to do what is in the best interest of getting people to pay them money. But that's Google, so that's the game we play, and you still want to be present, you still want to be there. But yeah, that's something that we've been seeing on the organic side, a little bit of channel shift.
Cannibalization from the paid channels, paid search.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
I have 5 minutes left. Does anyone else have other questions? I'll let y'all ping me if you do, or put them in the TLC calls, and I will come over here and look at the questions that we had before. How significant of an update is this in comparison with the other standard updates? How much should we worry? I
mean, I would only worry if you're really, really if your scores are really, really bad. But here's what I've seen. And I don't want to generalize, but I look at a lot of sites, and what I've seen is most sites aren't doing that well. Most sites suck at speed. Most sites have not great scores, lots of opportunity to improve. But the thing that I would worry about would be that because this particular update has gotten so much visibility and awareness from stakeholders who maybe wouldn't be aware of your normal run-of-the-mill SEO updates, there's going to be more an increased sense of urgency to fix this. So if you're not also fixing yours, and somebody, like, let's say, all right, you're site A and site B, and every other signal is equal, which it never will be, but let's just theoretically say that it is, and they fix their core web vitals, well, guess what? It's a zero-sum game. They're going to jump you. So this is just a situation where, like, if you're really, really bad, go fix it. It's, again, not more important than content quality. It's not more important than general, like, being good at technical, or getting lots of inbound visibility and brand awareness and whatnot. But it's a piece of the pie for sure. And if you're bad, go fix it.
Yeah, it feels like to me as optimizers that we've been, harping on page speed, especially performance, and stripping out a lot of the superfluous content that has a lot of politics behind it, but might not actually help conversion. And maybe this core web vitals updates aren't as big of a deal, but maybe we can use them to push forward some of the enhancements and improvements to page performance and site usability that we've all been trying to make happen for a while.
Yeah, right now everybody's, like, in my experience, for the most part, equally bad. So
I've seen quite a few of those reports, and I have to agree with you.
It's not going to stay that way forever, though, because it's a shiny ball, and Google's really been pushing it. So people are going to get better. So don't be one of those people that doesn't get better.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jake. I really appreciate it. With your permission, may I send the deck to the TLC?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So everybody, I will send out a PDF of the deck with all the links. Feel free to ping Jake on the TLC if you have follow-up questions that you weren't able to ask, or you watch the video later and think of some questions. You can ping there, and I'll send the email out hopefully by the end of the day, along with the recording to the video. Thank you all. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. And I have to say, Lucas, I love your new animated background. It's like stunning. I want one. I'm like back here. Beautiful. All right. Have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe.
So.